The Middle East is rapidly changing. You know, there are prophets that say the world will come to an end in the Middle East. You know that, right? And we have weapons today that are so scary. When you look, I rebuilt them all.
صدمه آمریکا اگر ورود در این میدان بشه، ورود نظامی در این میدان بکنه، صدمه جمهوری ناپذیری خواهد بود بدون تردید.
Intensify the United States has sent what the president called.
Are we hours away from a US-Iranian war? Or are we witnessing one of the most dangerous and smartest games of political and military pressure in the history of the modern Middle East? Between Washington and Tehran, there are no definitive answers, only layers of deliberate ambiguity. Perhaps that ambiguity itself is the most dangerous element of the current scene, because silence is sometimes more terrifying than the sound of rockets and more threatening than the strike itself. Over the past weeks, the United States has intensified its military presence in the Middle East to an unprecedented degree in years. We are not talking about symbolic movements or a media show of force, but about military steps that closely resemble those that preceded major, long-term wars. Dozens of fighter jets, F-15S, F-16S, and F-18S, long-range strategic bombers such as the B-1 and B-52, aerial refueling aircraft, Patriot and THAAD air defense batteries, and direct reinforcements to US bases in the Gulf, Iraq, and Jordan. But the most telling and most dangerous move in strategic calculations was the decision to transfer the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72 from the South China Sea to the Middle East. This was no ordinary decision, and it did not come without cost. The Abraham Lincoln was part of the U.S. deterrence system vis-à-vis China, and withdrawing it from that sensitive region means Washington accepted creating a relative military vacuum in East Asia at a time when tensions are escalating over Taiwan and the South China Sea. At the same time, the aircraft carrier USS George Washington CVN-73 was stationed in Japan near Yokosuka Naval Base to cover the Western Pacific, while the newest and largest carrier in the world, USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, was deployed in the Caribbean and the Atlantic under different arrangements. Practically speaking, this means the United States has redistributed its most valuable naval assets globally, placing the Middle East at the top of its priorities and Iran at the center of that focus. To understand the gravity of this decision, one must understand what an aircraft carrier truly represents. An aircraft carrier is not merely a massive warship, it is a fully integrated, mobile, air and naval base. It is a floating city staffed by more than 5,000 personnel, capable of carrying between 75 and 90 aircraft and helicopters and conducting hundreds of sorties per day. Powered by 2 nuclear reactors, it can sail for decades without refueling. Aside from a single mid-life nuclear refueling process that can take more than 3 years, the United States currently possesses 11 supercarriers, 10 Nimitz-class carriers, whose construction began in the late 1960s, and 1 Gerald R. Ford-class carrier, representing the new generation that will gradually replace the Nimitz-class. The cost of a single Nimitz-class carrier is estimated at $4 to $6 billion, while the Gerald R. Ford cost more than $13 billion, excluding development expenses. Daily operating costs range between $6 and $8 million per carrier, figures that explain why this weapon remains the preserve of a very limited number of countries. Despite owning 11 aircraft carriers, the number actually deployed at sea at any given moment usually does not exceed 3, due to long maintenance cycles, training, and major overhauls. For this reason, deploying an additional carrier to the Middle East is not a simple decision, but a calculated strain on global capabilities. All of this comes within a broader context that began 6 months ago, specifically during what became known as the 12-day confrontation. This confrontation was neither a full-scale war nor a random explosion, but rather something closer to a large-scale field test. The United States and Israel typically operate with a phased logic in managing major wars. The first phase relies on a swift, focused strike. Assassinations, strikes on sensitive centers, paralyzing command and control, and attempting to trigger a rapid internal collapse. If this phase succeeds, the war ends before it expands. If it fails, the second phase begins. What happened during those days was that the first plan did not achieve its full objectives. Iran did not collapse. It responded. It launched ballistic missiles that reached deep into Israeli territory, penetrated advanced defense systems, and caused unexpected damage. In return, the Israeli and American sides incurred political and military costs, which explains the acceptance of de-escalation without achieving the declared goals. From a purely American perspective, however, that confrontation was not a failure. It was an invaluable experiment. During those days, Iranian air defenses were tested, as well as response speed, missile launch patterns, movements of military leadership, command and control networks, and even popular and political reactions inside Iran. At the same time, the Americans and Israelis identified weaknesses in their own systems, an extremely important outcome in any future conflict. After that, the shift began from the testing phase to the preparation phase. This helps explain why the strike did not occur 2 weeks ago, despite all indicators suggesting it was imminent. The strike within hours scenario was not necessarily a war timetable, but an intelligence and psychological tool. When Iran believes an attack is coming within hours, it begins to reveal its real cards, activating air defenses, moving missile platforms, relocating leadership to fortified sites, and activating emergency protocols. All these movements are monitored by satellites, aircraft, and electronic surveillance, turning into precise data. The goal was not to carry out the strike then, but to observe Iran in the pre-war moment, the most dangerous moment and the one that exposes the most military secrets. After that, it becomes nearly impossible to change all these deployments in a short period, even if the other side realizes what has happened. The most dangerous remaining question is this: can Iran sink a US aircraft carrier like the Abraham Lincoln? Theoretically, no weapon is completely invulnerable. Iran possesses ballistic and hypersonic missiles, drones, quiet diesel submarines, fast attack boats, and electronic warfare capabilities. But in practice, an aircraft carrier never operates alone. It functions as part of an integrated strike group that includes Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, attack submarines, support ships, and dense air cover. Targeting such a system requires complex coordination and a simultaneous multi-axis attack, with a high risk of igniting a full-scale war that cannot be contained. If war breaks out, it is unlikely to remain confined to the United States and Iran alone. We are talking about a multi-front regional conflict that could involve Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iraqi factions, the Houthis in Yemen, and direct attacks on US bases and interests in the region. At the same time, China will watch the scene closely and may benefit from any American distraction or military vacuum in East Asia. In conclusion, what we are witnessing today is not a fleeting escalation, but a delicate strategic phase. The movements are real, the names are clear, the aircraft carriers are in position, and messages are being sent at the highest possible level without firing a shot. The question is no longer whether there is pressure, but whether this pressure will turn into a full-scale war, or succeed in imposing new realities without an explosion. Only the coming days will provide the answer.